So this is an information webinar for the Professional Diploma in Intermediary Studies offered at the University of Limerick. My name is Sinead Liston and I work in the Faculty of Education Health Sciences. I'm joined by members of the programme team who will be presenting today, Dr. Alan Cusack from the School of Law, Dr. Anya Kearns from the School of Allied Health and who's also the course director for this programme, and Dr. Aoife Gallagher, who is a speech and language therapist by background. She led on the EOI and design of the intermediary programme here at UL and currently teaches some of the modules. This session will give you an overview of the programme and what you can expect if you enrol in this course. So I'm going to hand over to Aoife now to speak through the next few slides.
Thanks, Sinead, and I'm just going to introduce exactly what the role of the intermediary is. So the main function of the intermediary is to assess the vulnerable person's communication needs and to provide direct support to ensure they can understand and communicate to the best of their ability and to negotiate adjustments with other professionals working with them to facilitate effective communication in the legal process. The role is underpinned by 6 basic operating principles. Those include accommodations provided only with the consent of the person. Neutrality is very important. The intermediary is a neutral party with no interest in proceedings. The intermediary will avoid directing a person, so any accommodations they do recommend will be the least directive accommodations. The intermediary has an important role to avoid contaminating an investigation. They must work transparently in every aspect of their involvement, and accommodations that facilitate understanding and expression. That is the role of the intermediary, to identify and suggest these accommodations. So now I'm going to move on and talk a little bit about how the role and the programme has come about here in Ireland. So we have a timeline here of the history of the programme, I suppose. So before 2020, there was a review of the protections of vulnerable witnesses carried out. And in that, the recommendation was made for the use of intermediaries. And in 2021, the Department of Justice sought expressions of interest from higher education institutes to design and deliver a professional qualification programme. And myself, Anya and Alan were involved in submitting that expression of interest and in designing this programme. So in June, we were confirmed that we would be able to run the programme funded by the Department of Justice, and that commenced in October 2021, the design of it. And in 2022, then, the programme was launched by the Minister of Justice, and the applications were opened to CORU-registered health and social care workers or equivalent. In September, we had our first cohort of intermediaries on the programme. The programme is offered exclusively by the University of Limerick, and it's a unique intermediary qualification. We believe the only higher education institution level 9 award of its kind, and the qualification is a current requirement to be eligible to join the court register to work here in Ireland. And as I've said, we accept practitioners that are CORU health and social care registered or equivalent. So our first cohort were in 2023, and subsequently we have run the programme and it continues to run into 2026 academic year. I'll hand over to Alan now, who will explain a little bit about the legal landscape in which the intermediary works.
So hello everybody, and I suppose one of the key aspects of the Professional Diploma in Intermediary Studies is its interfaculty structure. And in that regard, it's a very unique programme, and it's delivered collaboratively between the School of Law and the School of Allied Health. So for many of you watching this video who are considering applying to the programme, you may not have studied legal subjects before. So what I'm going to do over the course of the next 2 or 3 slides is simply give you an overview of the legal basis for this new professional role that you would be applying for and training for. So principally, the provision of intermediaries in the Irish justice system, it has a statutory basis. That means that there's policy or laws that underpin the role of the intermediary. And there's 2 routes. Our policymakers have established intermediaries under 2 different pieces of legislation. So my colleague, Dr. Anya Kearns, will talk you through the modules that you'll be studying during the diploma, there will be 2 law modules and 2 allied health modules. But in the legal modules, one of the modules is the laws of evidence, and we would introduce you to the Criminal Evidence Act 1992. So going back, over 30 years now, Irish legislation has envisaged that there would be a communication specialist in courts, and that was established in Section 14 of the Criminal Evidence Act 1992. And that saw the role as predominantly being one to support victims and prosecution witnesses in court who may have communication issues. And more recently then, the Oireachtas introduced a secondary piece of legislation that also made provision for the role of intermediaries, and that was the Criminal Justice Victims of Crime Act in 2017, where it was recognised that you may have victims who have specific protection needs who would also have the benefit of an intermediary. So we would introduce you to, in the law modules, the legal basis for the professional role of the intermediary in our courts. Just then, in terms of how the law would envisage your role or how it's defined in legislation, generally speaking, an intermediary will be granted by a court. An application will be made that a particular witness needs an intermediary because of some communication issue. And if the court feels that it's in the interest of justice that this facility be extended to a witness, they will grant permission for an intermediary to be appointed. Now, the key thing is the intermediary's role, as Aoife has outlined, it's a neutral role and it's purely instrumental. So there's no kind of therapeutic aspect to the role. It's purely instrumental in the sense of ensuring that communication from the legal professionals, the barristers normally in court, or the judge, that communication is understood by the witness, and then any replies from the witness are understood by the courtroom actors. So you'll see here in the slides, the intermediary's role is to convey questions in a way that's appropriate to the witness's age, their mental condition, so that they can understand what's being asked. So sometimes it'll just be a question of highlighting for the barrister that, look, that question I think is a bit complex, could you reframe it? And the key thing is the intermediary, their role is not to kind of take over the examination of witnesses or to start putting questions themselves. And that's something here that the legislation, the 1992 Act, has said. And indeed, Tom O'Malley, who was behind one of the key reports that led to the establishment of our training scheme, he said, look, the intermediary is in effect an interpreter. The substance of the questions that are being asked in court is still something that the barristers are in charge of. But the intermediary's role is to make sure that those questions are understandable. So that's kind of the legal basis, and that gives you a flavour of some of the legal principles that we will talk through during the law aspects of the programme. Say here in this slide that to show you that this role is evolving at a very quick pace, that even though we'd intermediary since 1992, the first time an intermediary was used in court in Ireland was just over 10 years ago in a case from 2015, DPP versus FE. And what we've seen in recent years since that case is that there's been a growing recognition of the value of intermediaries. So having been a kind of dormant measure for very many years, intermediaries are now becoming much more popular. And you'll see that, as Aoife said, the O'Malley report in 2020 recommended that a training scheme be put in place. The Department of Justice acted on that, and our diploma then was created in 2022 with a view to training professionals for this increasingly in-demand role. So I'll hand you over to Dr. Anya Cairns now, who will talk you through what you will be studying.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you to everybody who is watching this webinar. And I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts of how the programme is actually delivered, because I'm sure that's really what you're thinking about. You're busy individuals holding your own professional practice, and so thinking about how do you balance that professional practice against ongoing education. So our programme is accredited by the University of Limerick, and it is a level 9 degree. We have our students take on 4 modules over the course of 1 academic year. So it runs from September until April, and that leads you then to a 30 ECT qualification, which is called the Professional Diploma in Intermediary Studies. Now, it is a part-time programme, and we are aware that you are all practising in your own individual areas and disciplines. So we use a lot of blended learning. So the law modules are delivered completely online via Brightspace. They are asynchronous, and they happen in that first semester. I'll talk a little bit more in the next few slides about that. And you, through the online, virtual learning platform that we have in UL, which is Brightspace, you will be able to access your lecture recordings, your slides, all of the recommended reading, and any other relevant learning materials. And then our second set of modules, which are actually based in the School of Allied Health, they are also blended, but we have an on-campus delivery as well as online delivery. And we identify the timetable for that. Those will run in the springtime. We identify the timetable usually in December. It's important to recognise that each ECT is equivalent to around 25 hours of endeavour for a student. So students do find that there is a commitment to learning that's needed for the law modules and for the intermediary modules across the academic year, but it is manageable to balance that against your own workload as well. Just to note as well that the assessment frameworks for the modules are confirmed by the module coordinators for each module, and there is a range of assessment techniques that we use. So let's dive into what those modules actually are. So in autumn, you are front-loaded with the law modules. So we have our law of evidence and our advanced crime and criminal justice module. And these are, as I mentioned, asynchronous online modules that you link into at a time that is convenient for you throughout the semester. But information is uploaded on a weekly basis. In spring, we have our role of the intermediary modules. These are blended in that they are on campus and online. And as I mentioned, the timetable is circulated in advance. Let's look a little bit further at the modules themselves. And when we start with those autumn modules, getting a good grounding on law of evidence, this module is one that actually our students have previously said there's a lot of learning in there, but it becomes really relevant when you move into the spring semester and really understand how the intermediary role fits within the principles around evidence and evidence law. So the topics, as you can see here, that are covered include all of those legal principles around evidence. And there is a nice overview of the module here in terms of the assessment. The module is delivered, as we said, asynchronously, and you do have discussion forums where you engage with other students on the module about key topics. There is an end of term exam. And there's also an assignment where you look at a case note and really pull out those key issues. And if we move into the next module, and we see the advanced crime and criminal justice module, this gives students an opportunity to really get some critical insight into crime and criminal justice and understand about the justice system. You will see here the key topics that are covered in this particular module, and the assessment in this module is a written assignment at the end of semester. And they're the two autumn modules. Moving into the spring modules, we look at the role of the intermediary, starting with context and communication. This provides students with an overview of the professional, legal and ethical context of intermediary practice in the Irish justice system, and looking at our nearest neighbours as well in terms of how the intermediary role has evolved. It looks at the roles and responsibilities, it looks at communication needs, we look at trauma-informed practice, reflective practice, also aspects of the special measures that are available within the Irish courts, and really digging down into accessible communication and communication needs. We have a mixed framework of assessment here, and that is identified at the start of the module, but has in the past included things like poster presentations, oral presentations, and so on. And if we move then to the final module, which is the role of the intermediary, methods and techniques, and this is the real nuts and bolts of intermediary practice. So this really explores the skills that are needed, the competencies and the insights into safe practice as an intermediary in the Irish justice system. Within this module, we also have our court simulations, which is always referenced by our graduates as that key point where things start to come together. It allows that consolidation of learning across all of the modules. And this happens, as I said, usually around March time in that spring semester. and we send out the timetable in advance. There is a mixed assessment here. We do look at reflective practice. We also look at assessment type tasks around question deconstruction that might reflect practice within the courts, and that will be outlined at the beginning of the module. And so if we move along to how the items are delivered, just to bring you back to Brightspace. So as you said, this is a blended programme with the first semester complete delivery of the programme online with asynchronous content. So we use Brightspace as our online learning management system. When students are enrolled, they will get access to our Brightspace, and all of the learning materials will be available through there. We also on Brightspace have a page for the programme itself. Within that, we would have the course outline, we'd have our welcome address and various citations and research information, as well as updates on what is happening within the world of intermediary practice, both within Ireland and internationally. And then just to come back to meeting our team, so we've already introduced ourselves. So I am very happy to take any questions that people might have. Please do email me, reach out to me. I would be happy to follow up by email or even arrange a phone call. So I'm the course director. We've already identified Dr. Alan Cusack, who teaches on our law components and coordinates with the School of Law, and Dr. Aoife Gallagher, who also teaches on our intermediary modules as well. And we would be delighted to hear from you. We, just to finish off, have a little bit of recommended reading if people would like to look at some of the areas that we actually propose as reading for our students. But obviously each module we set out recommended reading and touch on key areas of research practice and theory that are relevant. So this is just a sample if you would like to have a look at that. And as we said, please do reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anya, Aoife, Alan, for your time. Like that, if there are any questions, please do feel free to reach out to the programme team. They'd be delighted to speak with you. And thanks very much for watching this webinar.